Hello. Today I'd like to discuss Higher Lonely Power by Fireworks. Fireworks is a knack from Livonia, Michigan, a suburban vicinity of Detroit, and Higher Lonely Power is the band's first LP since 2014. Before that exist 3 LPs, most of which consist of decent material where a lot of its prowess, for me, comes in its lyrics. Often the band as performers had set a supportive pop-punk or alt-rock background for the lyrics and melodic catchiness to shine through as much as possible. Detroit, off their first record, and Run Brother Run, off their third record, are good examples of this if you'd like to see a career songwriting progression. This record finally comes to light after a 4-year hiatus and delays due to the COVID pandemic. In terms of soundscaping, I'd pin this as their most experimental project yet. It's difficult to call any song alike to each other as the band either blends or individually emanates influences of alternative rock, pop-punk, post-hardcore, power pop, and or others, depending on the track's calling. The ambition in that department is much appreciated and surprisingly not lost in focus, but it's the execution of that ambition where I feel a bit more mixed on the effort. It kicks off with a bang on God Approved Insurance Plan, containing more intense instrumentation than we're used to seeing the band sport at this point. The next song opts for more synth flair in its power. There are a couple songs here that attempt this direction with varying levels of success, with this song being, to me, on the lower end of that success. It's essentially apparent in the song's intro where the bombast of the combined synths make a wall of noise fronting an otherwise sentimental emo cut. Megachurch has a similar problem with its keyboard usage, although the sappy post-hardcore production of the other instruments naturally brings it down in the mix. Machines Kept You Alive and How Did It Used to Be So Easy are notable improvements on this, even if each song has their own issues. The more complex and emotionally rich keyboard melodies of those tracks shows the band often retains the catchiness necessary to drive those messages home. The other elements of the composition, whether that be in guitars, drums, or vocals, are more middling on average. However, as I noted on the opener, the band does a good job of selling the more energetic cuts, and I prefer that side of the band to, say, the poppier elements on the record like Goodnight Tomb or Woods 2, where the lyrics are consistently solid enough that these tracks just pretty much serve as instrumentally tailored backdrops to the animated vibe of stuff like Funeral Plant or Veins in David's Hand. Going back to the topic of experimentation, there are a pair of tracks that sit smack dab in the middle of the record that represents the band's newfound outreach. The former has an excellent bouncy and dreamy scenery, even if I think it sorely mismatches the tone of its lyrical content. The latter begins as a ballad and suddenly shifts into a frantic drum and bass-like segment within the 3-minute mark. For me, such a daring move can be a huge winning formula, but I think the second half just can't escape its initial awkwardness despite several re-listens. Captivation-wise, leaving it at the same place as the ballad segment right before it, and I know that's unfortunately not where the band really wants to sit with that track. As mentioned, the band's biggest strength has pretty much always been on its lyrical content. Their previous works had much of their material written on subjects of self-doubt and light nihilism and how those afflictions affected their relationships. A common yet effective songwriting angle in emo circles. The way the lyrics would often associate themselves with bits and pieces of various imagery would elevate otherwise good songwriting into great songwriting. This hasn't changed on this new album, but after 9 years it's understandable that the band has shifted directions to some degree with those associations. Interjected commentary of Christianity with the songwriter's personal life is now fairly prominent, and most of its potential was reached on this new album. Some cuts did decently providing a critical angle to the matter, such as God Approved Insurance Plan or Megachurch, while others built simple, more neutral parallels like I Want to Start a Religion with You or Estates. The majority of these tracks are a bit more bread and butter for the band, which ends up yielding some pretty nice results. Funeral Plant compares the writer's coping mechanisms of self-loathing to those around them, rather than having that mechanism be drugs or Jesus, as the singer puts it. It's just them imagining themselves at a time when the self-loathing didn't exist, which is actually quite well thought out. Blood in the Milk is a vivid description of the writer's day-to-day grievances with thoughtful metaphors and fairly clever lines. While I think it's musically a bit bland, the closer, How Did It Used to Be So Easy, also has creative commentary on nostalgia and the guilt from feeling like potentially wasting so much of another person's life. So the lyrics barely ever miss, but I think that barely rears its head on Jerking Off the Sky, where an otherwise terrific song suffers a mismatch of punkish lyrics and a dreamy atmosphere, selling its frustrated commentary shorter than it could have been if they instrumentally went a more God-approved insurance plan route. The results of all this are a bit more middling than I hoped, but it does seem that the band has a solid head on its shoulders trying to continue after such a long hiatus. At the very least, they got a strong core on the lyrical side of things, and I'd like to see the creativity of the music surrounding those lyrics to really shine through in future projects. I'll go with the 6 out of 10 here, with the best tracks being Funeral Plant, Blood in the Milk, and Veins in David's Hand. Thanks for listening, and I'll see you next time.